Joining us this afternoon, a Wednesday visit from Dr. Barry Taylor, author of Love Your Body, Your Path to Transformation, Health, and Healing. Dr. Taylor, how are you this afternoon?
I'm well. I'm a bit pensive, given what's happening in the world, and I'm pleased to hear your voice, and I'm really good to be with you.
Well,
how are
it's
you
great
doing,
to be.
Ken?
I'm doing well under the circumstances. I think everybody is a little bit stressed out these days for any number of reasons, but we certainly have plenty of reasons to be stressed out these days.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yep. We do.
Yep. There's no doubt. I mean, having dealt with the pandemic for the last 10 or 11 weeks now, and now we have all the unrest in the streets of America. It's just it's getting to be a little bit too much to bear these days.
It is. Chaos is defined as unpredictable behavior that appears random. It seems like we were just about doing well dealing with the COVID quarantines and sheltering in place. And were you sheltering in grace, or were you feeling like in prison? So difficult to be so challenged, Ken, to have some kind of sane, rational, sensible behavior. I mean, in your decades of life, have you ever been quarantined? Have your friends been quarantined? Have my friends? We were dealing with circumstances of a pandemic that, you and I were not around in 1918 or when other kinds of shutdowns, I don't know what it was like to live in London when the bombs were going off and people were sheltering in place. I mean, we didn't have anything to lean back on, and we did pretty darn well, don't you think?
I think we did.
And a little bit in some places of the country, and God bless, New Hampshire is so different than so many other places. Some friend on the phone the other day said to me, if you come up here to New Hampshire, it's like the virus doesn't even exist in terms of some people in some locations. He's on the coast. He's up in Exeter and Hampton Beach and et cetera. But and there were some people who came off out of being quarantined, pool parties that we saw, and other people kind of like people going off a diet, like you've been restricted for 3-5 days or 3-5 weeks. And now it's like, indulge and eat anything you want. Let's have parties, and those pictures of people in pools and different places, different cities was like, really? But now with George Floyd's death, it's like a whole other sense of being overwhelmed, like being buried or drowning under some huge mass when we weren't really reset yet, after getting our feet the rug pulled out from underneath us with the COVID. It's, I've just been thinking, like, what's really at stake? What do we need to do to bring to this moment, Ken? Who do we lean on for clarity and support? Friends, clergy, politicians? Oh my goodness gracious! It's like agitated people trying to coach and give advice to agitated people.
Dear. I just guess you have to rely on your faith and some of your friends and take it from there, and do the best you possibly can. Nobody at this point is going to change the world, but if we can do it incrementally in our own lives, I guess that's what we have to be concerned with.
Exactly. So I remember going back to when I was in college. That was a few years ago, Ken. It actually was in a different century, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
and I had transferred into Brandeis here in Massachusetts, in Waltham, Massachusetts, as a political science major. I for sure knew I was going to be a congressman or a senator, and I hadn't heard Ken Cale's wisdom yet of you can't really change the world, but I thought I could. And I remember a teacher saying to me, you really can't. But what you can do is really change yourself. You know, if you really wish to, and not just predictably react the way your childhood and the rest of, your tribe has got you programmed and conditioned. He didn't use those words, but I do these days. Then changing yourself, you might be able to see the world differently, or you might be able to work on whatever you think needs to change about the outside, but from a very, very different place. And it kind of been a core for me, Ken, for the last, 50 years. 50 years since I was in college. That gives me some solace about what we can do to deal with overwhelm. And there's no doubt that we are more of us are swimming in a sea of overwhelm and really winging it than whatever we had set up before that we thought was predictably workable. And my experience as a naturopath, working in the healthcare world, learning, spending tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars and thousands of hours traveling around the world in the nature of healing, is that when we get overwhelmed, when we get pushed, that this is the moment that for most of us as human beings, our Achilles heel flare. So that if you tend to have headaches, you might have more headaches. If you have hormone imbalances, you'll have more. If you have digestive upsets or skin irritations, or, you have difficult breathing and asthma and allergies, your allergy symptoms would probably get worse. Not because there's more pollen or trees, which there might be. I don't know. I haven't checked the pollen count. But because when you and I, when we're under stress, when we're less than able to meet the demands, then whatever pain we might have been in prior, whatever stiffness, whatever depression we might have had, you get the drift. We all have certain strengths and weaknesses. Whatever your Achilles heels are, they tend to get worse. So I thought we'd talk today about, so what could we do? How do you stay sane in a world that seems really more chaotic than maybe any of us have ever experienced? You and I were alive when, there was civil rights stuff in the 60s, although a good deal younger. And there have been other people that have been murdered, and there have been other, awful things that have happened to people. But there's a certain kind of collectiveness of how COVID has really been worldwide. And whatever happened in Minneapolis, there are people demonstrating in the Mideast. There are people demonstrating all over Europe. I mean, it doesn't, it's like, there's a different kind of emotional pandemic, I think, happening, that the world is at a tipping point, I think, potentially, that really begs how do we deal with this as human beings without being, what's the word I could use, reactive? What's happening is so many people are pent up. They're storming the streets. You can't, you can't. I can't as a human being. Maybe somebody else can, who maybe has different political leanings or different kind of social leanings. Can't make anybody wrong for them wanting to express their outrage over a police officer putting their knee on somebody's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, such that the person gets asphyxiated, because the other knee that wasn't on the neck was on the low back, so he couldn't breathe. He had two different knees. He had the weight of the whole police officer on his body.
Yep.
So let's make it simple, because you get a sense I could get emotional over this. So physically, Ken, physically, more people are tired. B vitamins. If listeners are able to write any of this down, I'm going to deal with this like we're holistic, we're mental, spiritual beings. So physically at a time, we've talked a lot about what we could do for the immune system. Well, here we are where I'm suggesting that we're in a sea of chaos. Most of us, whether we're feeling grief or we're feeling anger or we're feeling rage or we're just numbing ourselves, there's something that's in the air, that's undeniable, that physically this is another moment where, so I could eat better, I could eat less sugar, I could have less alcohol. I might have more B vitamins. In the Love Your Body line, it's called Energy B, and there are plenty of other really high-potency B vitamins out there besides the Love Your Body line. We could really do healthier smoothies mid-morning, mid-afternoon. These are things to keep people with their blood sugar steady. They're going to be honoring and listening to their body because they have a sense that for another week or two or three or a month or two, that their body is going to be under a lot of stress, even if we turn the TV off and we didn't get the day-by-day blow of the memorial service tomorrow, and then he's going to be buried next week. And we have the whole world at large of how we're dealing with this, and we're not even out of COVID yet. We're not even, in Massachusetts, you can't even go to restaurants. You got to go to, go up to see you to eat out. The restaurants aren't even open here in Massachusetts.
But you have plenty of people on the streets in Massachusetts.
Plenty of people.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Yesterday, massive protest. So the organ that gets really stressed out in the human body is the adrenals. Adrenals about the size of a pea can. It sits on top of the kidney. Another name for kidney is renal. AD in Latin means above. So above the renal is called the adrenal gland. It's part of the endocrine system, pituitary, thyroid. You and I have adrenals. We have testes. Women have ovaries. So the adrenals make what? They make adrenaline. So even though it doesn't feel like a cop pulled you over on the road, and it doesn't feel like red neon lights going on, if we're agreeing that there's a fair amount of chaotic, unsettled energy out there, and if we're agreeing that to some degree, consciously or unconsciously, we're all attempting to buffer the stress, then the organ in our body, which is why I said earlier, all of our Achilles heels flare. If you have allergies, they're going to probably be worse. If you have digestive symptoms, they might get worse, is because the adrenals are in alert. They may not be in acute alert, like you've got heart palpitations, but trust me, this whole pandemic, what did you say, 10, 11 weeks? I mean, it seems like it's a long time. And now we have this unrest. Well, thank goodness, people are not adhering to curfews in the cities that do have curfews, but it seems like some of the violence is quietening. We'll see what happens with the other three police officers about whether they'll be charged or not. We'll see whether that's in any way going to allay people. Well, let's see what happens. I'm not saying, I'm not voting on that. I'm just saying the tension in our communities across the world, even if there are pockets of New Hampshire where there's probably maybe more peace in New Hampshire than there is in a lot of other cities and a lot of other states. It's very stressful. From a physical point of view, there's something that is more than an energy B vitamin. It's called healthy adrenal in the Love Your Body line, and there are different kinds of herbal combinations. Speak to a functional medicine doctor. Call me, text me. If you feel really tired late afternoon, that's when the adrenals take a nap. People's sleep can get really unsettled. You listen to the news before you go to sleep, or even if you turned off the news 6, 7 o'clock at night, a lot of people are so unsettled, Ken. They're so irritated from the day's news or speaking to people.
Right.
Just people are outraged. I met a wonderful new doctor, Anne, who's got a clinic in Quincy, Massachusetts, wonderful woman who's knows an enormous about nutrition and health and healing, and she uses something called Norvegesic. It's a supplement made by Standard Process. I wasn't familiar with it. It has California poppy. It has Jamaican dogwood in it. She uses that a lot for stress, a lot to help people sleep. I'm learning a lot from my conversations with Dr. Ann. I use things like theanine in something called calming formula. I use something called 5-HTP, which is an amino acid when people are depressed, and it's showing up as poor sleep. So I just wanted to say some things about how to stay sane in a chaotic world where we're breathing, we're exercising. If all you do is walking, then walk vigorously. Don't walk quietly unless you're walking quietly and slowly, and that's your meditation time.
Mm-hmm.
But really use your breath, something so symbolic about I can't breathe.
Yeah.
I can't breathe. You know, it's like all of us now, on behalf of honoring that man and other black men mostly, some white, but certainly the amount of black men that are killed in our culture is just undeniable. And we all need to take a breath because we're...
No, go ahead,
Ken.
Doctor. Yeah, go ahead.
That,
Yep.
you know, we need to stretch. Now, we don't have access to saunas and steams. So those are a few of the things, because my sense is that physical tension that we talked about, now not everybody might be outraged, okay. Not everybody might be crying or grieving, okay. So if it's not getting processed in emotional feeling terminology, Ken, it's getting processed intellectually, like you and I agree, most people are stressed. Now, people might not have the distinctions how to interpret that through their heart, through their emotions. They may not be feeling something, but they may not be clenching their fists. Yes, their blood pressure may not be soaring high. That's another thing that could go up. But it has its effect. And my point is that the more stressed you and I are, all of us are, and now we're not talking about a few people in a few cities here. We're talking about, oh, my God, the stress level has just gone through the roof, and it's probably going to stay through the roof for a while. Then that's not the time to try to be rational or sane. When your limbic system, the part of your brain, is really emotional, whether you're feeling and conscious of those emotions or not is not the point. When your limbic part of your brain is really engaged, your frontal cognitive centers in the front part of your brain are turned off. No matter how much, when we're madly in love and we're orgasmic and I love you and we make big decisions because of what we feel, not saying that's a good idea either, Ken, but when we're upset, when we're angry, we don't need to justify the anger. Just leave it when we're angry, when we're irritated, when we're unsettled, when part of us is just feeling so triggered. It's very difficult to be rational at the same time, despite most of us attempting to say and we say things to people that sometimes we're sorry we said, right? You've done that, I've done that, we've all done that. So it's a time that whether you're protesting or you're not protesting, whether you're on the street or not, first it's a time to take care of your body. Do some things, snack more, eat healthier, do some of the things you and I have talked about. You've been so wonderful to have me on your show. That is about taking care of yourself, like ask the question, what do I need? What do I need to do to reduce the tension in my body? Then you can continue to look at, well, what kind of system did I grow up in as a kid? Because there are a lot of people, wonderful, sweet, very intelligent, unbelievably fabulous people you and I have met, where the upbringing that they were brought up in was, stop being angry, I'll give you something to be angry about. Or, that you're crying over that? Remember, that's why I wrote the chapter in my book on emotions, if you remember that short chapter, about a vow of respect of allowing yourself to feel whatever you feel and really making it okay so that you can just create some space for, I feel this way, now how am I going to deal with this feeling? Because in our culture, my experience practicing as an naturopath the last 45 years is that people internalize their anger a lot. Women get endometriosis. I'm not saying all endometriosis. I'm not saying all breast cancer. I'm not saying all irritable bowel. But we human beings internalize a ton of unresolved feelings and emotions because we grew up in systems like that emotion is not good. Stop feeling that. Or you think you've got to justify it. I often kid around in workshops or with people if you want to get somebody in therapy, you want to get your son or daughter in therapy or your wife, somebody, when they say, I feel this, if they could identify it, and sometimes you and I do, right? We say things to another person, I feel this. If you really want to drive them into therapy, say something like this: why do you feel that way? Get them into a way of trying to justify, and then people become like the Pope, where we'll evaluate if the reason that they're feeling what they're feeling makes sense to us. As opposed to, people don't have to have any justification for why they feel. They can just feel what they feel. So that would be another big piece of being sane at a time that's chaotic. You don't have to go, well, COVID-19, and I haven't, gotten hugs, and I haven't gotten to tip my glass with Ken in way too long. You don't have to have the reason to why you're feeling tense and tight. And maybe you didn't get those kinds of meta messages in your family about you don't have any right to be angry and you shouldn't feel that way. But there are a lot of people who have had to deal with some kind of thought police, some kind of people in their tribe that, either condoned what they were feeling, made sense to them, or didn't. As if when you're feeling afraid or when you're feeling anything, Ken, you need to justify it to anybody. You really don't. So here's a tip for feeling sane in a chaotic environment. Work on learning about empathy. It's been one of my projects, I'd say the last maybe 15 years, and there's a book called Empathy, Marshall Rosenberg's book on nonviolent communication, how to really get over in somebody else's reality, who doesn't necessarily think like you do, doesn't necessarily feel like you do, and their wiring, their parents were different than your parents, and how do you really practice empathy as a way of you getting clear what's the action that you could take rather than you taking action out of your emotions, being so reactive. So next to empathy, there's compassion, and that's why I wrote a whole chapter on compassion. And I can say, that it's just one of my projects in life, Ken, to learn how to be more compassionate, because I don't know about you, but I forgot if there was a course at college on compassion, I didn't see it. If there was a course.
You missed that one, huh?
I missed that one, Ken. I don't know what happened. When I was going to church, and, I've been really fortunate to have some wonderful priests and ministers be patients of mine, and I used to take my kids to their church on Easter, and, I was brought up Jewish, and I was extremely close to my rabbi. I named one of my sons, my second son, after my rabbi. I used to go on retreats with him all the time. But, and we used to talk about stories, right, like Bible stories. But I don't ever remember until I read, the Dalai Lama book, who said to me when I met him, when I was in a conversation, I had lunch with him, he was so black and white. He said, I don't really care if people are Tibetan Buddhists. That's interesting. He said, I care if people really practice compassion in their lives. And as much as I loved the relationship with the priests that I had when I opened the clinic, did a lot of my courses, there were a couple of priests and ministers, and used to take my kids to his church services, it wasn't like through the wonderful social relations and through the wonderful rituals of that Catholic Church and the rituals that I grew up in as a Jew, that there was a lot that I learned about compassion. Did you learn a lot about compassion growing up as a kid?
Not really. Not really. No,
Yeah.
That was never really stressed. No.
Yeah. And so that would be an example of, if we could just take a breath. Everybody says we need to take a breath, right? If we could take a breath, I am really stressed out. I am really overwhelmed, whether sometimes I feel like crying. When I turn on the TV and I see people crying, I see some black man who I love and I've spent a lot of time with, Van Jones. He's on CNN, an amazing lawyer from Yale, so committed to the environment. And he was talking about when George Floyd got killed, and this morning George Floyd's son was on TV, and Van was crying because he said, I wonder if my son sometimes would have to cry over me getting killed. So regardless of whatever emotions we may or may not get touched by who we're listening to, how do we find sanity in this sea of chaos? And my suggestion is we need to take care of our body. We need to breathe. That means walk. If it means jumping jacks. If you're in a wheelchair, tear some phone books, and you can breathe while you rip some pages in your phone book. You can be a paraplegic. There are ways you can get yourself breathing. That's different than really seeing that what we need in this moment, I think, it's just my opinion, is we need some empathy for one another. We need some compassion for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're all...
No doubt about it.
And I don't even necessarily can know what that means or what it looks like, even though I wrote a chapter in my book on compassion, because I don't want to think like I have a formula, like I know. All I have is a sense that we need to somehow spiritually leverage ourselves, because there is so much anger, and the looting and the destroying externally is so understandable, the way some of the women I mentioned to you would be internally sometimes, and men do it as well. Sometimes women do it more, but all of us as human beings can internalize anger, or internalize certain emotions, because we just, every time we started to speak to, like I said, then somebody would try to analyze why we were feeling that way. Somebody didn't listen to what we were feeling empathetically. They didn't just say, wow, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for including me. Thank you for trusting me with what's going on with your heart. So it's not like I know the answers. I know I read a book in 1985 written by Harriet Lerner called The Dance of Anger. And I know that there are some steps of identifying emotions, to own your reality, identifying your thoughts, because if you're not identifying what you're feeling, what am I feeling now, then we usually, me too, we usually kind of, especially as you can see what's happening on the streets all over the country and in other places of the world, you rush into action. And sometimes you say something to your beloved or your best friend, or you say something to somebody at work that, oh, God, I wish I could take that back. You know that, right? We all do that.
It's happened to everybody. Yeah.
We didn't zip it,
Right.
We couldn't contain it. It kind of came out like flatulence. It's like, oh my God, it just couldn't hold it.
Well, Dr. Barry, we have to take a break, but I will mention right now that I just saw a tweet from Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, former presidential candidate, and she informs us that Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison is increasing charges against Derek Chauvin to second-degree murder in George Floyd's murder, and also charging the three other officers involved at the scene. And she says this is another important step for justice, and let's hope so.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's get our sponsors to tell people and thank our sponsors, and we'll come back and talk some more.
Very good. Dr. Barry Taylor is with us. He's the author of Love Your Body, Your Path to Transformation, Health, and Healing. And the entire nation needs healing at this point, without question. Dr. Barry Taylor is with us, helping us get through just the last few months of COVID, since March 11th, when everything started to shut down and close up, and we started to quarantine, and now over the last 9 days, in the wake of the killing of Mr. Floyd, we have been going through some very tumultuous times in our country, and the stress levels for most are at a high level. So we are learning a little bit today on how to cope with all that, thanks to Dr. Barry Taylor.
I hope so. I'm learning with you.
That is our hope. I don't think many of us, have been through times like this where, it just seems like it's one thing after another in this country.
We are in uncharted territory, Ken.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. And we'll see. I hope the fact that other charges now have been brought, that this will help quell the violence that we've seen over the last number of days in this country, and even some arrests in Manchester last night. So it's hitting closer to home. But we shall see how it all plays out, and maybe this will be a step in the right direction. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out.
I'm not, my expertise is not as a social commentator. I have other areas that I know a little bit about, as you've come to know me over the last few years. The question to ask is this moment going to be different than any other moment? There have been a lot of moments when black men have black women, anyone marginalized, gay people, Latino people, Jewish people, called the Holocaust. There have been a lot of moments in our life where there have been some kind of betrayal, some kind of injustice, and there's something about what was happening externally with COVID and the enormity of social norms that were just upended just for all of us. You can't go bowling, you can't go to pool halls, you can't go to bars, you can't go to church. Why could you never go to church? So that kind of, disruption of our routine in what some of us were talking about, is the pandemic going to lead to some kind of new awakening? Are we going to look back at this moment 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now? You and I may or may not be here 40 years from now, Ken, but but are somebody going to look back and say, well, that was when the awakening started? That wasn't, when it was just horrible, but people started to speak values differently. I don't know about changing values, but the isolation allowed people to appreciate connection. The way that things were taken care away from them allowed them to really appreciate what they had, how easy it is for us human beings to take things for granted. But then on top of that, to really peel back, the whole stuff from the 60s that black people who live in the communities that they live in have felt the unsettledness. Yes, is that the word? They just live in a different reality because of their skin color than white people. And then to deal with that murder, but not just somebody, but then, oh my God, somebody who dedicated themselves to the rule of law, somebody who had dedicated themselves and no doubt had I'm going to say, big heart, had committed his life to service, the way state troopers do, the way police people do, the way Marines and Army and Navy people, anybody who says this is what my calling is. And then for him to do such a thing, it's talk about throwing oil, on fire, talking about gas on fire. So I think one of the things to do, Ken, is to start to we were in a sea of uncertainty. I'm now suggesting we start we're in a sea of chaos. This is chaos. Even if the other 3 officers today are charged, and even if we hope, we pray that a lot of the violence and looting really abates, but I mean really significantly, and all those pent-up people that didn't know what to do, right? That's what we're thinking. They just didn't know what to do with their emotions, that we all really start talking about our emotions. We start talking about how we make decisions in our life. How can we get some? You remember Tip O'Neill? You remember Tip O'Neill?
I certainly do.
Do you remember what was great about Tip O'Neill?
Well, I know that Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan had very different views on the political scene, but managed to, work things out over the years. And
there you go. You go. Tip O'Neill, was this, I think he was Irish. I don't want to say he was Irish if he wasn't, but he was.
I think you can make that quantum leap. Yes.
You think so? He was this rotund, and he was a liberal guy. He was Massachusetts. How could he not be? But what you said was exactly dead on. It was like so different than the political world today, which is so polarized. Where people are so entrenched in their own position. There's so little empathy from the politicians. There's so much divisiveness from the top down. There's so much make wrong, and the left, is like making, Trump wrong. It's like we all need to think like, how are we going to work together? Because one of the things I'm suggesting to people, your listeners today, and anybody who listens to this afterwards, is as we need to come together as communities to find ways of speaking to one another where we're not just what we have to say, but we're really working on how we listen to one another. Can you respect one another's real differences? Kind of exactly what you said between Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
Martin Luther King says hate doesn't, heal hate. Evil, the dark side, the underbelly that we all have as human beings. I'm just going to call it the dark side. That the divine part of us as human beings, we're beings of light. There's an essence. We all have a certain divinity. I think that's what churches were all about thousands of years ago, before Christ, since Christ, is the structures and the rituals were about having us bring our best part of ourselves out as human beings. And if that's what that does when you go to church, great. But when people come to me and they say they go to church, I always say to them, well, do you have a personal relationship with Christ? And if they don't, then I'm scratching my head wondering they're just going to church because their parents went to church. Or they're going to church because it's a social thing, which is different than that sanctuary, gorgeous building that you go to is a place where you get quiet. It's a place where you find stillness. And if church doesn't work, well, New Hampshire hiking trails, yay!
We got plenty of those, and I'll tell you what, plenty of people are taking advantage of them now. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So if it's not church, is a hike enough? We can't get massages; they're not open yet. Is making love, eyes open and embracing another person enough? What we know, Ken, is here's the bad news. I can say it on your radio show. A couple of beers and martinis is no longer enough.
Right. Right.
You can't get enough of what you don't need anyway, and we need some communion. We need community. We need to really find how to really love those people who we think are our enemies. Whether they are our enemies or not is not the point. We need to find ways to love people who we think are so different than us. And that's, I think, a way of dealing with some of this chaos and feeling more peace inside, or we're all going to find different ways to vent. In my world, people come to me. It's not like everybody with irritable bowel or asthma or cancer or migraines. You get the drift. It's not like everybody has got unresolved emotions. But there are a lot of people, that's why my book is very holistic, where it's not just what you're eating. Remember, people are eating the cornflakes instead of the box. Remember, they should eat the box. There's more nutrition in the cornflakes box than the cornflakes.
Well, Dr. Taylor, I know your words will resonate with many today, and we appreciate that. And really, I wish that we had more time, but we have to wrap it up. But we will continue along this path and explore others in the not too distant future.
I want to end by saying, Ken, I miss you. I love you. I've come to really like who you are and what you stand for. And thanks so much for letting me have a conversation with you. I hope you and I can see each other soon.
I do too. I do too. My pleasure, and thank you so much.
Okay,
Dr.
God bless.
Barry
Have a good
Taylor.
one.
And the book is Love Your Body, Your Path to Transformation, Health, and Healing.